It was the time long before European ships ventured into Africa. In the small town of Uke, amongst the Igbos, myths and legends abounded. Nwangala River was the big deal in this town. It was both their source of drinking water and their god. Tales were woven by the elders of Uke about the power of the gods who dwelt in the river. There was a time when the children of the river gods began to find their way into the lives of the people of Uke by being born as mortals. Those children of the gods brought with them wealth and riches into the families they were born. At a point it became a common practice to inquire from oracles if a newborn child was of the gods or of men. In the cases where a child was of the gods, it would call for great celebration. The family into which a child of the gods was born would know that its affairs were lack and penury were over. Their new child would fill their houses with riches. Their barns will be filled with plenty. Their farms would produce abundantly. Their chickens, sheep, goats and cows would increase, and even the woman in the family would know no bareness. However, as Uke prospered and the sound of joy filled it, their river gods were not happy. They sat and agreed to recall to the river kingdom all their children who had been born as humans in Uke. So one Eek market day, death began to sweep through the land of Uke. The children of the gods were being summoned home. At the streams, at the marketplace and in the farms, dead bodies piled up. Wailing and sorrow filled the land. On that day, Uke, a once happy town, became a byword for sorrow. If one cried over one's dead relatives or losses, such a person would be told, "Do not cry like Uke. It shall be well again with you." However, there were few children of the gods who did not heed the call to return to the river kingdom. They found life in Uke much more enjoyable than their lives in the river, as children of the elder river gods. They made a stand and refused to return to their kingdom. The river gods sat yet again and sent emissaries to them, but they did not heed the call of the gods. Their minds had been made up to live as men. So the gods of the river kingdom cursed them, and in one day all the 20 of them ran mad and began to feed on the people of Uke like the beasts of the field. The elders of Uke sought the gods for answers, and were told to bring to Nwangala River the heads of those 20 rebellious sons and daughters of the gods. Warriors skilled in the art of killing were sent, and within weeks the heads of those children of the gods were supplied at Nwangala River, and so the curse of the children of the gods feeding on the people of Uke ceased. After the departure of the children of the gods, the wealth they brought with them began to diminish until there was nothing left of them. After the pain and searing sorrows which overtook the joy those children of the gods brought to the land of Uke, the people of the land decided they would never let the children of the gods dwell amongst them, nor seek them to be born into their homes. They made it their tradition to inquire when a baby is born, whether it is of the gods or men. Before celebrations would begin for the newborn child to their midst, they would first seek their river gods to know if the child was theirs. Such inquiry was done by throwing newborn babies into Nwangala River. If the child disappeared into the river, then it was a child of the gods, but if it floated, then it was of men. Though mothers hated the practice, they still had to do it to forestall the danger of the children growing up, only to turn into flesh-eating beasts. After ages had passed and the pain of the people Uke over the loss of many of its sons and daughters, children of the gods who were born as men, had dulled. A princess of the river kingdom was born in Uke as a baby girl. A barren woman, Umbanko by name, who took in after many years of barrenness, gave birth to a baby girl whose kingdom could not be determined by being thrown into Nwangala River. When the child was thrown into the river, it sunk in. The moments later it sprang up. It kept doing this until the priest who tested it in the river lifted it and gave it back to its mother and pronounced the child to be of men. The priest did not understand what happened, nor had he seen anything like that all the years he had been testing babies in Nwangala River. When the baby was handed back to Ongbankwo, she and her poor husband broke into celebration. They had thought the baby was gone when it sunk into the river. They took the baby home and named it Urenma. And so the baby began to grow. When the baby had grown into a girl, tales of her unusual beauty spread through Uke and beyond. Men and women described her as beautiful as the moon, while others said her face shone brighter than the sun, and some even dared the gods and said they must be jealous of her beauty. Young boys of her age claimed she was no human. No one took the little boys seriously because she had survived the test at the river and so must be human. When Urenma had reached the age of 17, her father's house became some form of tourist center. Men of different classes and from all climes began to flock to her father's house to ask her hand in marriage. Urenma's father, Okike, who had since the birth of his daughter became a wealthy man, was loaded with all forms of gifts and presents by men who sought to marry Urenma. Those men hoped that their gifts would persuade Okike to make them his choice for his daughter. Though Okike gladly received their gifts, the power to choose who Urenma would marry was far removed from his hands. His daughter Urenma had made it clear to her parents that the choice of whom to marry would be hers to decide. However, Urenma had no intention of ever getting married. She was a princess of the gods from the River Kingdom who was granted permission by the gods to be born as mortal and to dwell amongst mortals for a brief time, and then return to the Water Kingdom to fill her role as a princess of the gods. Okike and Ngbankwo were not aware of this. Though they had often wondered how she was able to do some of the things she did, they did not think she was a child of the gods. How could she have been after all the gods returned her when she sunk into the river? When her parents asked her about how she could do the unusual things they saw her do, she would explain that she saw them in her dreams. Though she always visited the river world every night in her dreams, that was however not an explanation for the things she could do. Urenma was able to heal her parents' sick animals, predicted the weather, described unharvested farm produce, told her parents the persons who would visit them before the guests arrived, and spoke to animals. While Uke and the villagers around them waited with bated breath to know who Okike would give his daughter to as wife, Urenma had a fatal accident. She found love. One day Urenma was at Nwangala River washing sliced cassava for her mother when a handsome young man walked into the river to fetch water. Some young men who were washing their clothes at the river began to poke fun at him. The young man was poor and looked dirty. His name was Obins. Obins had lost his parents while he was still very tender and was left with only his aged grandmother. The old woman was too old to fend for herself and Obins, so from a young age Obinza began to farm and hunt to care for his grandmother. Life was not fair to him, but however he killed enough animal and harvested enough farm produce to keep him and grandmother from starving to death. This time of the year, Uke Youth Wrestling Festival was about to begin. Every young man in Uke had taken to the chief priest a strong and healthy cow, for the chief priest to perform a ritual which would keep them from breaking bones or sustaining injuries, which could lead to death in the wrestling match. Every wrestling festival Obinza would fail to take part in wrestling matches because he could not afford to give the chief priest a cow. Even in times when he had a cow to give to the chief priest, he would sell it so he and his grandmother could eat. So some of the boys at the river that day ridiculed him for his poverty and continued failure to take part in the wrestling festival every year. Their caustic words shot at Urenma's heart like arrows. Obins did not reply a word to them. He simply held his udu, earthen pot, under the river so water could fill it. Meanwhile, Urenma could no longer bear the taunts hurled at Obins. Though she had not met him before nor had heard of him, her heart went out to him in compassion. From her task of washing sliced cassava tubers, she raised her head like a cobra and barked at the young men who made fun of Obinza. "Shut up, you fools! How I wish your mothers squeezed you all dead while you were trying to come out of them. You are all filthy and deserve not to live. I swear by the gods tomorrow, Obinza will fight at the wrestling festival, and he will break each of your bones and be crowned champion." Urenma's words broke over the young men with the power of her other nature. The boys cowered and froze with fear. Obins was afraid and raced to her defense, thinking the boys would attack Urenma. He was surprised that they didn't. Obins thanked her for coming to his defense, but told her that she shouldn't have bothered, because he had grown accustomed to their taunts. Urenma told him that she meant what she said, and asked Obinza to wait for her to finish washing her sliced cassava. As Obinza and Urenma walked home and chatted about the wrestling festival, she took Obinza's hand like a woman would take that of her lover. Obinza was surprised and couldn't say a word. He had heard of the fame of her beauty and the class of men who jolted each other with their wealth to win her hand in marriage. Urenma deliberately took Obinza's hand. She knew what she was doing. She knew the news of that would spread through the entire village, and she wanted it so. She was miffed at the way Obinza was treated and wanted all to know that he was going to be the next big thing in Uka. She would make sure it happened. Urenma told Obinz to meet him at the chief priest's shrine as soon as he got home and set down his water pot. About 40 minutes later, Obinza met Urenma at shrine of the chief priest, holding a gained cow. She handed it to him and said, "Go in and see the chief priest. Let him offer the ritual for your safety in wrestling festival. By tomorrow you will be breaking bones at the village square." "But Urenma, I won't be able to break their bones. Won't the same spirit protecting them be protecting me?" "Don't worry about that. By tomorrow the spirit that protects wrestlers will not be at the village square. I will be the one watching over the wrestlers and will decide whose bones I want broken. Go in now and see the chief priest." Obinz did not understand her meaning, nor had he seen a weird character like her before. After the chief priest was done with Obinza, he came out of the shrine and met Urenma. Ure, as she was fondly called, was happy for him. She gave him a pile of new clothes hidden in a basket and said, "These are for you, Obim. Tomorrow you will be dressed in your best as you make your way down to the village square." Obinza's heart palpitated when Urenma called him Obim. No woman had called him by that name, nor had they taken notice of him, and now the most beautiful of them all called him by that name. Urenma drew closer to Obinza and gently rested her forehead on his. She could hear Obinza's heart pounding rhythmically. She knew he was in shock of the affection she had shown him and her beauty. She said to him, "Would you let me walk by your side as you make your way to the village square by tomorrow?" "Yes, I will be happy to." "Thank you, Obim." Obinza was in a hurry to pull himself away from a woman whose beauty of the gods paled in comparison to hers. As Obinza turned to take a walk away from her, Urenma pulled him back and asked, "Can I kiss you? You will need it tomorrow to win your matches." Obinz was speechless. He stood staring at the beauty in front of him, and then, as if nudged by an unseen hand, Obinz grabbed and kissed her passionately. When he was done, he felt energy surging through him like the power of thunder. He shook and fell to the ground. Urenma began to laugh at him and sat beside him on the ground. Obinz asked, "What was that, Urenma?" "Tell me the truth." "Well, I already know it. Was that your first kiss?" "Yes, it was. I have never kissed a woman before." "You should not have felt all that energy now. It should not have come now until tomorrow on the ground. This is not good for us, Obinza. It means, well, forget it. That was my first kiss too. No man had kissed me all my life." Urenma suddenly looked crestfallen. Obinza sat up from the ground and asked, "Has your hand been given to a man in marriage? I did not know. Please forgive me for taking the liberty to kiss you." "Don't worry about that, Obinza. It is not the reason I feel sad. I was going to kiss you anyway. I was expecting it to be just a simple kiss to help you at the square tomorrow, but it wasn't." "It wasn't? What does that mean?" "Obim, don't worry. I hope you will understand my meaning later. Let us go home." In the night when Urenma had gone to bed, she slipped into the river kingdom as that was her habit. But that night she went to the river world with an intention to make a request to the gods. As the gods sat, deliberating on the affairs of men and spirits, Urenma walked into the chamber of the gods, dressed in the full power of her beauty. She knelt before the gods and asked to be given permission to speak. The eldest god waved at her to speak. "Lords and gods of the spirit world, I have come with a burden. My heart is heavy. I need you to make it light for me. I have found a man amongst mortals whom my heart has grown soft for. I know I am a princess of the spirit world and cannot love a man. However, I have come to make my requests known to you all. I want you to grant me permission to love him until my time amongst men is fulfilled and I be summoned to return. I am now partly flesh and the nature of flesh sways me." The eldest of the gods spoke. "When you asked us to grant you the unthinkable, which was to be born as mortal, we did. But what you did not know was that the permission to be born as a mere mortal also gives you the right to love a man. But," the eldest gods bellowed, "you must never marry the man whom you choose to love. If you choose to marry a man, there will be so much you will lose. There will be consequences." Urenma was relieved to know she could love a man. She thanked the gods and returned to the natural world. She woke up in her hut and shed tears of joy. By dawn she would tell her parents about her love for Obinza. She knew they would protest because of his abject poverty, but she knew that would be no problem. She would turn his fortune around and make him the wealthiest man in Uke. She was confident that if she told her parents that Obinza would become the wealthiest man in Uke, they would believe her.